Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Spencer Bonnie. I'm the Executive Director of Achieve Brown County. Thank you once again for joining us for our monthly chat with Spencer. For those of you that are returning viewers, thanks for joining us again. I'm really pleased to be joined this morning by somebody I've known for a number of years, Superintendent of the Howard-Suamico School District, Damian LaCroix. I'll turn my attention to him momentarily, but for those of you that are new, want to tell you what this is all about. So we began this Facebook Live series a few months ago with the intention of giving our friends in Facebook land the opportunity to better appreciate and understand the work of Achieve Brown County, especially through the eyes, ears, and experiences of our key stakeholders and partners like Damian and the institution that he has the opportunity to lead, the Howard-Suamico School District. So here we are doing that once again, this time with Damian LaCroix. Damian, very happy to have you with me this morning. Thanks for taking time to do this.
Thanks, Spencer. My pleasure. Great to be here.
So you and I have known each other really since the start of the century, I can say. I first had the opportunity to meet you when you were principal of Pulaski High School, and my wife was a teacher there. That you then moved to Suamico Elementary for a few years and ultimately then moved on to your current role as superintendent. So I would love, and I'm sure our viewers would love to know a little bit more about your journey, but why don't you first tell us who is Damian LaCroix? Give us a sense of who you are as a human being, what's most important to you, and then if you would, tell us how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. So my hair is a little more gray and you've got a little less hair since we first met. A little bit. But, yeah, big open-ended question, right? Who is Damian LaCroix? So a lot of different ways I could take this, but from Wisconsin, born in Madison. My dad was in graduate school back in the 60s. He was in agribusiness, so he moved around quite a bit growing up. There was always a value for education on the part of both of my parents. So I watched both of my parents learning and growing and serving. And my dad was a kind of a prolific reader. I always noticed, even at a young age, that he was often reading. And my mom just had a servant's heart. She worked in nursing homes and then eventually ran her own home healthcare business, really meeting the needs of the elderly late in life. So combination of a strong work ethic and a learner on my dad's part, coupled together with a compassionate heart on my mom's part, really kind of molded and shaped my philosophy. And then, of course, had some great public school teachers and coaches and principals who really made an impression on me. So ended up going to Fond du Lac High School down in the Valley. Wasn't really exactly sure what I wanted to do coming out of high school relative to options and choices. And back in the 80s, things weren't quite as planned and orchestrated as they are today. So almost by happenstance, ended up at Lawrence University, where I studied history and had the opportunity to play 4 years of college athletics, which is a great learning experience as well. And in 1991, I was applying for positions in Pulaski Community School District. I had an opening at Pulaski High School and applied there and started teaching and coaching Pulaski High School. And within a short period of time, went and got my master's degree in educational leadership. And I had the opportunity right at Pulaski then to ascend into a bigger leadership role as an assistant principal. And then within a period of a year became principal, and we passed a significant referendum then back in the mid 1990s to build what was then the new Pulaski High School. So stayed in Pulaski for 11 years. And during that period of time, Melissa and I got married. Melissa was my high school sweetheart from Fond du Lac, and we had 4 children in 5 years. And in 2002, felt like we needed to slow things down and look at some other opportunities. We loved Pulaski, loved the life of a high school principal, but it's 24/7, 365. And this afforded me the opportunity to continue to do what I love. So I accepted a position as elementary principal at Suamico Elementary. It's the the elementary on the way to the new zoo on County Trunk B, for those of you who are familiar with that. And it was a great life stage and experience. I was able to be the principal for my 4 elementary children for a period of time. My wife was heavily involved in volunteering at the school, and really learned a different aspect of the K-12 experience, working with elementary teachers and parents and families and children. So that was just a terrific 3 years. And in 2005, the Board of Education here in Howard-Suamico asked if I'd be interested in applying for the superintendent job, and I said yes, and became the 5th superintendent in 6 years back in 2005. So we were in a state of transition, and we had some turmoil at the time, and 16 years later, here I am. So it's been a great journey. There's been ups and downs and in-betweens, but I've learned a lot, and grateful for having had the opportunity up to this point in time.
Damian, thank you for all of that. I especially appreciate your inclusion in your story of your family and some of the people in your life that are most important to you, and the decisions that you've made together along the way. As you and I have talked about many times, that's something that I value very much as well in my own life. So thank you for that. I am intrigued a little bit more about how you chose a career path in education. So if you wouldn't mind, tell me more about how you made that decision to pursue teaching in your career as you launched it.
Yeah, well, my father was the first one on his side of the family to go off to college, and he was one of 7 children, and a German immigrant farm family on the lakeshore of Wisconsin. And my grandpa's plan was for him to take over the farm, and he kind of broke ranks and went down to Madison and became a walk-on for the Wisconsin Badgers back in the 1960s, and ended up getting a degree in agribusiness and then a master's degree in soil science. So I think he really was a catalyst in our family for casting a bigger vision for the power and the potential of education. And again, just I think through his influence and having some really influential coaches and teachers through my time, primarily in the Fond du Lac School District, really was clear to me that, and I know sometimes students struggle with, what do they want to be when they grow up? And I just always had it fixed in my mind that, teaching was a very noble profession, and that you can really influence lives long-term for the better. And that really attracted me to public education. I still think, and I believe this, and I've encouraged all 4 of my kids to consider public education, and now they're 19, 21, 22, and 24. But I think public education is one of the most endearing and enduring professions in America. And really, our schools are at the crossroads of our community, and we have such an opportunity for influence and impact. And I just wanted to be part of that larger process, and saw how it benefited me and benefited others. And so that was an attractor, and I never really wavered from that. And now, almost 30 years into the profession, and I can tell you there have been some challenging seasons during this time, but I've never regretted entering into this profession, and strongly encourage anyone who really wants to make a difference to consider it.
Well, that's great perspective. And I know I can speak for people that you and I both know, including people that I live with, in saying we couldn't agree with you more. If anything, the role of an educator has been amplified relative to its importance and value in our community at times in our journeys like we're all experiencing right now. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. But pre-COVID, what are some of the greatest insights, perspectives, lessons learned you've gained along the way?
Yeah, so, well, let me step back just for a moment. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my grandmother on my mom's side. She started teaching kindergarten in a one-room schoolhouse back in the 1930s. So I think there's a legacy of teachers, and I've got a number of aunts who are educators as well. So, lessons learned are so many, right? At the end of the day, I think it's, while we need resources, we need great facilities and great technology. I think at the end of the day, it's about, can we attract and can we develop and can we retain the best people? I think Colin Powell probably said it best one time when he said, relationships matter and people get things done. You can have great plans, great strategic visions, and all those things. But at the end of the day, it's really about great people. And I think for anyone listening today, I hope you can identify with at least one educator somewhere on your journey, right? As the lights go off.
The lights go off. It happens all the time in my office. I wish I could have fixed that, but thanks for laughing.
This is a lights out statement right now.
Right, no doubt.
I hope you can identify with one person that, changed the trajectory of your life, one conversation, one class, one athletic event. And I had a high school wrestling coach, second generation Italian American from upstate New York. His name was Larry Marcianda. And he had been an Olympic alternate back in the 1960s. He ends up in Fond du Lac and just took an interest in me from the middle school on, and just really gave me, time, energy, and attention at a time where I really didn't believe in myself. He believed in me more than I believed in myself, and would just make little comments to me that were just really uplifting at a real formative stage. And nothing profound looking back on it, but just really timely and thoughtful. And he was such a good role model from a work ethic, competition standpoint. I learned a lot about how to compete. I learned a lot about how to persevere, through trial and difficulty. When you're in front of a gym of 1,000 people and somebody puts you on your back and, people are screaming and your team's depending on you. And, how do you bounce back from adversity? So just lots of great life lessons that I think even to this day serve me well. And, I could tell you, a number of examples like that, but, persevering through difficulty, work ethic, treating people with respect. These are lessons that, should be learned around the dining room table, and in many cases still are. But, this is a community-wide, imperative, right? It takes a village to raise a child. And we joke in Howard-Suamico that it takes two villages. We've got both
Indeed.
Howard and Suamico, but how do you move the values? We talk at the Board of Education level for moving the values from the dining room table, from the dining room to the boardroom to the classroom, right? So that's the transference of values. And that's really one of the beautiful things about public education is we get the opportunity to be part of a process whereby families and the community entrust to us their most precious resource, their kids, and we can engage them in this great conversation about what are the values of the community. We can codify those values at the boardroom, and then we can apply those values in the classroom as our teachers are working right now as I speak. I visited a number of classrooms on Monday, and I see it happening real time. And it's just, there's an art and a science to it, and it's a beautiful thing when it's working the way it's designed to.
I agree. And this is a great segue into my next question, all of what you just touched on directly relates to this next question. And as you know, it's been the same question that I asked of the previous two guests on Chat with Spencer, but it's not only the topic of the moment, it's the topic of the year. So this has been a year unlike any other you've experienced, any other we've experienced collectively relative to COVID, the ever increasing rise of the social/racial justice movement. You are facing every single day an ever evolving environment that's requiring you to make the very best decisions you can in the best interests of lots and lots of people, students, teachers, staff, families, community members. How have you been navigating that? Tell us a little bit about your own experience and what you've leaned on to navigate all of that.
Yeah, it's been truly the biggest challenge, I think, of my personal and professional career. And I lost my father right before the start of the school year, and to congestive heart failure and kidney failure, and wasn't COVID related, but that marks you, right, at a certain life stage. And I turned 52 last week. So really thinking about the legacy of my father, who wasn't that old. He was only 75 years old, and had the benefit of spending his final 3 days with him in his home, at his bedside, with some great hospice care. And so been really reflective, since that point in time. And then when you add all the other factors in that you just mentioned, and tragically we lost a teacher to COVID-related health complications early in the school year, and also lost a student along the way, not directly related to COVID, but through other circumstances. And so combination of those things coupled together with political unrest and civil strife and racial unrest and economic uncertainty has truly made it difficult, I think, to lead for all leaders. And in fact, this morning, part of a Partners in Education discussion with leaders from all different walks of life, public, private sector leaders, talking about how challenging it's been and leadership fatigue. And for me, at least here, one of the things that we said early, and we've been true to this, Spencer, has been just this notion that we need to lead on purpose. We're not going to lead, based on panic. And that sounds like a trite little cliche, right? But we've gone through some training over time where every one of our key leaders and many of our staff members have been exposed to this idea that we are to be purpose-driven as public school educators. And so, my purpose is inspiring others to embrace their true calling through purpose-driven leadership. And I feel like one of my roles is to be the chief reminding officer as superintendent. So I'm routinely asking or reminding leaders on our team to continue to lead on purpose. And again, every one of them has a 1 or 2 word purpose statement. And so I think when your why is big enough, right? We've heard this before. Simon Sinek, when he talks about the power of why. When you know your why, you can deal more effectively, not more easily, but more effectively with whatever or whatever challenge is in front of you. And so we want to jump right into planning and somehow bypass purpose, but I think there's power in purpose. And so from the beginning, I said, we're not going to lead based on fear and panic. We're going to be thoughtful. We're going to be deliberate. We're going to be purposeful and intentional. And we're going to lead based on our purpose. So our mission as a school district states that we will work together with families and community to ensure that our students have the knowledge and skills to succeed in a changing world. Well, what does that mean when you're trying to lead through a pandemic? If we're going to work with our families and community, it means that we're reaching out. It means that we've got parent focus groups. It means that we're surveying our families and our community to get their feedback, and we're incorporating that in a just-in-time way to inform our decisions about how to best move forward based upon community input. So, and who could argue that this is a changing world and that our students really require maybe a different knowledge and skill set than they did pre-pandemic. So our current thinking is, how do we move from recovery to reform? We're in a state of recovery right now, but we're moving into a state of reform, recognizing that public education is going to be fundamentally different in some ways in the future. The question is, what does that look like, right?
Right.
And so that's what we're deliberating on as we speak, and really trying to engage stakeholders in that great conversation.
So in the spirit of what you said, your role as chief reminder officer, I am reminded by a couple things, 2 big takeaways from everything that you just said. One is you can't make decisions in a vacuum, right? The perspective that you just offered relative to all of the decisions that are at play that you have the opportunity to make in order to move things forward is vast. There's no denying that. There's so much to take into consideration as you move from one day or 1 week to the next and make the very best possible decisions you can. I'm also reminded by what you said about grounding all of that in purpose. That to me personally is what it comes down to as well. And as leaders, you're absolutely right. We have a responsibility to remind those that we lead and those that we serve of the need to ground all of what we do in that shared sense of purpose that we have for the greater good, whether that's education or community service. It all aligns in that way. So such a great reminder. Thank you for that. A few more questions here as we enter the last third of our 30 minutes together. Take a minute now and look past COVID. At some point, hopefully, we'll be in a place where school can return to some great semblance of what we considered normal before the pandemic. At that point in time, what are your priorities for the future, for you personally and for Howard-Suamico?
Yeah, thank you. Our priorities continue to be in order in this particular order. We've talked throughout the duration of the last 9 months about attending to the social and the emotional learning needs, both of students and staff. And so, how do we attend not only to the head, the academic part of who we are, but to the heart, right? The emotional and the social piece. So try to give a lot of attention to that. Certainly safety, and trying to make the best informed decisions about how do we phase in a slow, thoughtful way students back into class, really born out of concerns we have about the impact that it's having on our students and our staff from a mental health standpoint. Being in a state of isolation for so long, even with virtual learning, is not equivalent to the connection that we can have at the classroom level. And I saw so many smiling faces, Spencer, on Monday. We brought our 4K through 6th graders back on an every other day basis beginning this past Monday, and just a lot of joyful kids, and frankly, a lot of teachers who were excited by the joy they saw in the faces of their kids. And then certainly, academic achievement, and concerned about the learning loss and how do we compensate for that, and how can we become creative to help catch students up and, prepare them for their future. With that in mind, one of the statements I've been making to our staff is that we're not going back to normal. We're going forward to new, right? I don't think it's realistic, and I think it would be irresponsible for me as a leader to somehow suggest that when things settle down, we'll go back to normal, because, I don't see that happening, frankly. I think we've learned some things through this process that should inform our judgment. And so as we enter 2021, and happy to leave 2020 in the rearview mirror, we're starting to make plans for, doing a SWOT analysis as an organization, looking at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and thinking really intentionally about what are the opportunities facing us in the year ahead. One example would be virtual learning. We know that about 20% of our students have actually thrived and done quite well in the virtual learning setting. And, it's not for everyone, right? And, a fair percentage of our students have told us that. But so how do we pivot, right? And make future accommodations for those who have discovered that I prefer to learn remotely. I prefer to learn from home. And so that's just an example of one of the things that we're thinking about as we move forward to new.
Thank you for that. Not only is that great perspective overall and what the future has in store for you in the Howard-Suamico school districts, what's most important to focus on, but really a great reframing of my question, actually, which I really appreciate. And I couldn't agree with you more, despite the fact that I refer to it as the returns to some semblance of normal. You're absolutely right. It's not going to be normal like it was for us pre-pandemic, and we need to embrace the new in that. In fact, I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day, somebody on my team, about the fact that if we're not seeking to continuously improve in our work or seeking to innovate constantly, we're no longer going to be relevant, and we're no longer going to deliver on our critical mission, vision, and efforts to improve outcomes for our young people in our community. And what I heard in everything that you said was I think a really strong representation of that for you and for Howard-Suamico School District. So thank you.
Well, I think it's kind of change management, right? And you look at the change management model, and we're in the dip right now. And when you're entering the dip of change, the natural reaction is when you start to get pushback and there's fear and there's uncertainty, you want to retreat and withdraw. And really, we need to work through the dip and the leadership imperative as you get into the, the trough of the dip is really to through communication and through quality planning, we can shorten the length of the dip and we can make it more shallow for everybody going through. And, the other thing we've thought really actively about, Spencer, is the stages of grief that I think all of us are working through. And so from denial to anger to bargaining to depression to acceptance, I think on that continuum, like where, the person right in front of you, where are they at? Some people are still in denial and some people have moved to acceptance, and a lot of people are somewhere in between. And so I think just acknowledging that this change is really hard for everyone. And, if we can plan better and more effectively, make data informed decisions, which I know Achieve Brown County is doing, come together with community partners, knowing that none of us have to do this alone, right? There's lots of support all around us. We can shorten the dip and we can go through it together, which is obviously much more desirable than, being on an island through this change process.
Totally. I really appreciate you bringing up the stages of grief. I think that's a great model for us to continue to use. And I'm reminded of the fact that that our experience of grief as it relates to everything that we're all going through right now changes from one day to the next, one week to the next. It's not a static thing. It's not like you move from one stage to the next and then continue on a path that's linear. You might go back and forth relative to everything that's going on. And each and every one of us goes through that in different ways. So your recognition of that, I think, is wholly appropriate and again, really great perspective. One more question for you as we wrap up here. You've been a stakeholder for Achieve Brown County for a number of years. Not only have you been a member of what was our Community Leadership Council, but now our Board of Directors. You also serve as the leader of one of our strongest partners, particularly through our graduation task force, the work that we have done with you, other school districts, nonprofits in our community, in developing a standardized system of mentoring to serve and support the needs of our middle and high school students across the county that are most at risk of dropping out of high school. If you wouldn't mind sharing, Damian, just some insights and perspectives relative to your partnership and support of Achieve Brown County over the past 6 years, that would be great.
Yeah, well, I'm really energized by just the notion that we can work together to advance positive cradle to career outcomes for all students, right? And that, we've got several systems within Brown County, and prior to Achieve Brown County, I think we were really program rich, but system poor when you consider both the school systems and the social systems that are at work. And so what Achieve Brown County has done, and your leadership has been essential in helping us go to the next level over the last year, is really creating this new civic architecture. I think someone once referred to, and it's really about, collective impact, recognizing that together we're so much stronger than we are working in isolation. And in fact, ironically, our theme as a school district for the year is united. United we stand. And when I think of Achieve Brown County, I see this united group of shared interests coming together. It's public and private, right? It's parochial. It's really trying to identify key outcomes, big levers that will move the needle in terms of community impact. And who can argue with the responsibility of investing in our youth as part of that process? When you think about not only just from a workforce and economic development standpoint, it just makes good sense, right? When you think about the fact that there's, about 50,000 students in Brown County right now, that is our future workforce. Those are our future leaders. And so coming together, using data to make really critical decisions about how to get students across the finish line of graduation into some form of post-secondary pursuit, keeping them in the area and really conveying to them that the greater Green Bay area and Brown County is a great place to live, to work, to worship, and to play. That's everyone's responsibility, but the civic architecture that Achieve Brown County makes possible creates an environment whereby we're all pulling in the same direction around some big, what I would call big lever outcomes that are going to really shift the landscape and improve the quality of life here for everyone. So I know that's high level, and I can be more specific, but what does that look like here? It means, creating partnerships where we've got youth that are in need of mentors, right?
Yep.
And, having a mentor with an adolescent, and if again, I would challenge each one of us to think back to your adolescence. And I don't know about you, but I needed a mentor, and fortunately, I found that through athletics. But not everyone is that fortunate, and not everyone is inspired by athletics. So how can we identify those students earlier in the process? We're talking about cradle to career here. Partner with our medical healthcare system, partner with businesses. We've got the Packer organization, the Greater Green Bay Foundation, United Way, some key partners in the community, really shoulder to shoulder with the school systems and other business leaders, including the chamber, right? Trying to figure this out together instead of working in isolation. So it just makes good sense. It's an idea whose time has come, and I'm grateful to be part of this process. And I know long-term, it's going to make us even better than we are now.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Said it better myself. So thank you for all of that. Two quick things to wrap up here. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I too had that mentor. His name was Mr. Smith. He was my high school choir teacher, and like you, he helped me at a time when I really needed some help discovering who I was and what was important to me, and greatly benefited from all the supports and time that he invested in me. He also was one of the very few first educators that introduced me to what it means to be a leader. So Mr. Smith, if you're watching, thank you. I can't say enough about the impact that you had as well. Lastly, Damian, as you know, we've been for years loosely throwing around this idea of social return on investment, which is a really big and complicated context. But what you just said, I think really got to the core of what that really means. And all of what we're doing today in terms of advancing outcomes for young people, there's a future return on that. And that return is going to be felt by our entire community as those young people that we're serving right now enter the workforce and bring more people into our community and bring more dollars into our community and strengthen the very fabric of what this community is known for and makes it great. So you're absolutely right. That is the long game in everything we do, and it's more important than ever. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking time with me today. Really appreciate all the time that I get to spend with you, however we have it. So thank you again, Damian. For those of you that are interested in our next Facebook chat, we will have one next month. We have yet to identify who that's going to be with, but stay tuned. We'll get that information out soon. Damian, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.
Have a great rest of your week.
You too. Bye-bye.